A few years ago, I was extremely skinny. This is what I looked like at 18 years old, and this is what I look like right now. In the beginning, I struggled to bulk, often eating until I felt sick. Now, I do it effortlessly. Here are the changes that I made to make it easy. When it comes to being skinny, the first thing you need to realize is that it's actually a superpower. For instance, if you want to look good when you're carrying a lot of body fat, you first need to start by losing a bunch of weight. When you're losing this weight, you're not going to be able to eat optimally to build muscle. So someone who has a high body fat percentage could spend a year, 2 years cutting weight and not put on a whole lot of muscle. However, if you're someone who is starting skinny, you can eat an optimal amount of food to actually gain muscle. And you can do this from the start, meaning that during the first few months of lifting, while you have newbie gains, you can take full advantage of those as you're eating an optimal amount of food. Not to mention, when you have a lower body fat percentage, you look a lot more aesthetic when you do have muscle on compared to someone who has a high body fat percentage. So as you're building muscle, you're going to look a lot better. Another thing you need to realize is when you don't have an excess amount of body fat on your body, you're going to have an optimal hormone level. Someone who has too much body fat, or even someone who has too little body fat, their hormones are going to be taking a bit of a hit. So as you put on some weight, if you're extremely skinny, or if you're in a healthy body fat percentage already, you're going to have optimal hormone health to start building some serious muscle. Now, when you do bulk, you want to make sure that you're bulking correctly. If you're a beginner, then I recommend eating in a 300 to 500 calorie surplus. As a beginner, you got newbie gains, so you can build muscle quite a bit faster than a person who's been lifting for a long period of time. So you want to be eating enough to take advantage of this. So this is why I recommend eating in a 300 to 500 calorie surplus. Now, if you're more of an advanced lifter, then I definitely recommend cutting the calories back, as you're not going to be putting on as much muscle as quickly. So what I am doing is eating 250 to 300 calories in a surplus every day. This is going to mean that I'm putting on about half a pound per week, which is as much muscle as I'm going to be able to put on. So in both these situations, it's going to minimize fat gain and mean that you're still optimizing for muscle growth. Now, this alone should make bulking pretty easy. Honestly, if you're not able to eat 500 calories in a surplus, then you're either counting your calories incorrectly or eating extremely clean. Like if you have a bowl of ice cream every day above your calorie maintenance, then you're getting that extra 250 calories in. Do I recommend eating ice cream? No, but I'm just explaining the fact that it's not that much more than what you normally eat. If you eat more than what I recommend, you're just going to end up putting on a bunch of fat. Yeah, in the short term, you might gain muscle a little bit faster. However, you're going to have to spend more time cutting weight. And while you're cutting weight, you're not going to be putting on muscle, and you may even be losing some. So by avoiding these long cuts with a lean bulk, you're going to be able to put on muscle for longer, which over time will put you farther ahead than the person who does a huge dirty bulk and then spends half the year cutting. Not to mention, putting yourself in a huge calorie surplus is not sustainable, and it's going to make you feel like shit half the time. The next tip is how to eat enough calories. If you follow my above recommendations for a caloric surplus, you shouldn't have a hard time reaching this every day. Usually when people struggle to bulk, it's because they're trying to be in too big of a caloric surplus and your body's just not having it. But when you put yourself in a slight caloric surplus, like what I mentioned before, not only is this optimal, but it also is going to be a lot easier to do. Another thing that I do if I'm struggling to eat enough calories is to drink some. When you drink your calories, it's going to fill you up a lot less than solid food. So it's going to be a lot easier to consume enough calories by drinking them. You also want to make sure that you're having 3 solid meals a day. So have a decent sized breakfast, a big lunch, and a big dinner. This is going to get you most of the way there, and then if you snack throughout the day or even have a protein shake, it's going to get you the rest of the way there. And then having the protein shake helps you reach your protein goal. A lot of people don't like doing this. However, it's got a lot easier over the years with AI and barcode scanners and stuff, but you want to make sure that you're tracking your macros every single day. I recommend doing what I do and get a scale, as that's going to be the most accurate way to track them. But if you can't afford it or you don't want to go through the hassle, then at least get a macro tracker. I recommend Macro Factor. I got a whole video right here that I'll post, but it has an AI food scanner, so you can just take a photo of your meal, or you can scan the barcode and have the exact macros of a packaged item in your macro tracker, as long as you know the serving size. If you're guessing your calories, you're not going to be able to dial in the 250 calorie or 500 calorie surplus, which is going to make you either think that you need to eat more, as you're not accurate on your calorie guess, and you're also not going to see as much results if you're not going to be consistently tracking your calories. And make sure that you hit your goal every day. If you're wanting to join a group of people who are just as passionate about fitness as you are, then I definitely recommend checking out my free fitness accountability group on Discord. I'll drop the link for that down in the description of this video. In order to make sure that the weight that you do put on while you're in a calorie surplus is not fat and is actually muscle, you need to make sure that you're doing two things. The first is you want to make sure that you're resistance training. Resistance training is a stimulus that's needed in order to signal to your body that you need to put muscle onto your frame. Without the stimulus, it's not going to put on any muscle at all. The second thing that you need to be doing is making sure that you're eating enough protein every day. Protein contains the building blocks for muscle, and if you're not eating enough, you're not going to have those building blocks readily available for your body in order to build muscle. I recommend eating 0.8 to 1 grams per pound of body weight of protein every single day in order to make sure you're getting enough protein for optimal muscle growth. I forgot to mention this before, but while you're resistance training, you want to make sure that you're implementing progressive overload into your lifts. Your body's not going to want to grow more and more muscle unless you apply more and more stimulus to your muscles. This stimulus is the signal to your body that needs to put on more muscle. Now, when it comes to bulking, there are a few mistakes that you want to avoid. The first of which is doing a dirty bulk. When I first started lifting, I thought that bulking meant that you ate as much as possible to put on as much weight as possible, and this was going to be optimal for muscle growth. And although a huge caloric surplus is going to make sure that you have enough calories to put on as much muscle as possible as quickly as possible, the problem with a dirty bulk is you also put on a ton of fat. And when you put on fat, eventually you're going to have to cut. During a cut, you're not likely going to be putting on muscle, and you may even lose some. So after I did this and spent like 6 months cutting, I realized that was definitely not optimal. Although I might have gained muscle quicker when I was bulking, when you take into account the full amount of time that you bulk and cut, you're definitely better off doing a lean bulk. Not only is it going to be healthier, but over the long run, it's going to be optimal for muscle growth. Another mistake that I used to make, and a lot of people make when they struggle with bulking, is skipping meals. You want to make sure that you're eating your full 3 meals a day plus snacks. If you skip a meal and try and make up for it later in the day, it's going to make it very difficult to actually eat enough in order to be in a caloric surplus that day. So I definitely recommend that you eat 3 times a day and then make sure you're snacking to fill in the rest of your calories. Another mistake that I made during my first bulk was not eating enough protein. You want to make sure you're getting in that 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight of protein per day. If you're not going to be putting on as much muscle as you possibly can. And if you're doing all these other things correctly, it's kind of a waste, because if you're not going to be eating enough protein and putting on an optimal amount of muscle, then you're putting an effort into these other areas that aren't going to get a full return. Another mistake that a lot of people make is not tracking their body weight, or at least not tracking it correctly. What I recommend doing is tracking your body weight every single day. Do this in the morning after you go to the bathroom, but before you eat anything. This is going to give you the most consistent weight. Your weight will fluctuate on the day to day, and that's fine. So you want to make sure you're taking your weight every day and then taking the average for the week. And then based off this average, you can see if you're consistently gaining half a pound per week, or if you're beginner, a pound per week. And if you're not, then you can make the needed adjustments so that you are doing that. When you calculate your macros, a big part of that is your caloric expenditure. And honestly, a lot of these calculators to calculate that are going off of a guess on how active you are. And typically this is inputted by you, and honestly, it can be wrong. Like, you may think you're more or less active than you actually are. So what I recommend doing is making sure that you're consistently weighing yourself and then taking that input. And if you're not gaining that half a pound per week or a pound if you're a beginner, then up your calories by 250. And if you're gaining more than that, then I recommend dropping them down by 250. If you end up downloading MacroFactor, it'll do it automatically based on you inputting your weights into that. But if you're not using MacroFactor and using some free app to calculate your macros, then it's essential that you're keeping track of your weight and making the needed adjustments. Speaking of MacroFactor, I made a whole review on the app, so if you want to check that out, then definitely check out this video right here. Don't forget to join my free fitness accountability group down in the description of this video, and don't forget to click subscribe.